then all of a sudden she pulls out a knife. But instead she just stabs herself in the leg.
What is going on there?
I'm in bed. I'm in awful pain.
Okay, are you there by yourself?
My wife is somewhere in the house. I can't find her.
Stephen Beard's voice trembled over the phone as he tried to explain what had happened. He was shot. He could feel the pain burning through his stomach, but he couldn't make sense of how it had all gone down. This was his home, where he felt safe, but now he was lying in a pool of his own blood, barely holding on. And the person who caused all this, it was someone he had trusted with everything.
Just couldn't believe what he just said. I'm panicked. I'm definitely panicked.
At that time, Stephen had no clue that his twin stepdaughters, Jennifer and Christina, would soon be caught in the twisted nightmare. He didn't know that after him, the same danger would loom over the girls he loved so dearly. And this horrifying event was only the beginning of an even darker story, one that would unravel in ways no one saw coming. The story began back in 1993, when Stephen Beard was living with his wife Celeste and her daughter Christina, who was just 13 at the time. They were a blended family in Austin, Texas, trying to create a sense of normalcy. Stephen had stepped into this role, becoming a father figure to Christina, while Jennifer, Christina's identical twin, was living far away with her biological father Craig in Washington State. Finally, the twin sisters at last had something to look forward to, a reunion at their grandparents' house in California. It had been over 2 years since they'd seen each other, and their excitement was overwhelming. They spent hours catching up, eager to fill the gap of all the time they'd lost. It felt like things were finally falling back into place.
My sister and I never skipped a beat.
Laughing so hard that we were crying, and I just couldn't believe that we were actually back together again.
But then, everything changed. Jennifer tried calling their father Craig to let him know they had arrived safely. She called again and again, but there was no answer. At first, they brushed it off, thinking he was busy. But as the hours turned into days without a response, dread crept in. Something was wrong. 2 days later, they got the news. Craig was dead. What was supposed to be just a short trip turned into Jennifer moving in with Christina, Celeste, and their stepfather Stephen Beard in Austin. The sudden change wasn't easy for Jennifer at first. She had just lost her father and now had to adjust to living with a new family. But to her surprise, Stephen welcomed her with open arms. He wasn't just her mother's husband. He became someone she could rely on. Despite the awkwardness that comes with being thrown into a new family dynamic, Stephen made Jennifer feel at home. He treated her with warmth and attention, showing her the love she needed during such a difficult time.
When I first met Steve, he was just so sweet, which was a relief, because he was technically my stepdad. On Sundays, it was really special because Steve and I would always go to breakfast together. I was very grateful to have his relationship.
Stephen did everything to make sure Jennifer was happy. For Jennifer, Stephen wasn't just a stepfather anymore. He was becoming a real father figure. She was grateful for his kindness and the way he accepted her into his life. As the years passed, the new blended family seemed to be thriving from the outside. Stephen, Celeste, and the twins appeared to be living a happy life together. Christina and Jennifer were now in their senior year of high school, and for the first time in a long while, they felt like they had stability. Stephen didn't just act like a father figure, he became one officially, formally adopting the twins and giving them each a special family ring to symbolize their bond.
He had always wore his.
He just gave it to us after he adopted us, and we thought it was the coolest thing.
I was definitely moved that he had this special ring made, and just the adoption alone, I felt pretty connected to him.
From the outside, everything looked perfect. The girls had found a sense of normalcy with Stephen, but underneath the surface, things were far from ideal. After everything that had happened, things took another sharp turn on the night of October 2nd, 1999, at around 2:30 a.m. Jennifer wasn't home that night. She was staying with her boyfriend. Back at Stephen Beard's house, Christina was sound asleep, unaware of the chaos that was about to happen. Suddenly, Christina's bedroom door flew open. The lights came on, and her mom, Celeste, burst into the room, clearly in a panic. Christina jumped out of bed, confused and alarmed. Her mom was frantic, saying someone was at the door. Christina felt a rush of fear, but didn't understand what was going on. As she made her way toward the front door, she saw flashing white lights outside, sirens blaring in the dead of night.
The lights turn on and my mom is running through the door saying, someone's at the door. And I'm like, what is going on here? I jump out of bed because she's in a panic, and I'm on my way to that front door when I see these white flashing lights.
In a panic, Christina grabbed the phone and dialed 911, trying to make sense of what was happening. She told them that someone was banging on their front door, and there were police lights flashing all around the house. The operator quickly assured her that the people outside were the police. Relief mixed with confusion, but Christina wasted no time rushing to the front door to let them in. When she opened the front door, she found herself face to face with the police. They asked her if her stepdad Stephen was home. She told them he was upstairs, unaware that something much worse had already happened. Without wasting a second, Christina led the officers up to Stephen's bedroom.
Open the front door and it's cops, and they're like, is your dad home? And I said, yeah, he's upstairs.
By the time they reached Stephen's room, the paramedics were already there, working to save him. The scene was overwhelming. Stephen needed immediate help, and the urgency was clear. He was losing a lot of blood, and the paramedics were scrambling to stabilize him. As they worked to get him ready for transport to the hospital, one of the officers made a chilling discovery: a shotgun shell lying on the floor next to his bed.
I'm like, what? Are you telling me he was shot? And they said, yes. And I just couldn't believe it.
It was a moment that sent Christina reeling. The realization hit like a brick. Stephen had been shot. She couldn't believe it. Her stepdad, the man who had welcomed her and her sister into his life, was fighting for his life after being shot in his own home. Shock and disbelief washed over her, but there was no time to process it. The paramedics were preparing to airlift Stephen to the nearest hospital, where they hoped they could save him. Christina, in a daze, called her sister Jennifer to tell her what had happened. The words barely made sense as they tumbled out, panic taking over. The sisters couldn't comprehend what was going on, both caught in a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. Christina's mind raced as they rushed Stephen to the hospital. She didn't know what would happen next, and the reality of it all felt too unreal to grasp. The house was now a crime scene, with yellow tape blocking off the area as investigators began their work. Someone appeared to have entered the house through an unlocked side door. From there, they had gone straight to Stephen's bedroom and fired the fatal shot. The first thing the police did is get DNA samples from everyone who had been in the house that night. They swabbed Christina, Jennifer, and their mother, Celeste. The police wanted to make sure they had every piece of evidence before moving forward. And just like that, the nightmare had only just begun. Christina found herself completely shocked. It was difficult to even process the fact that someone had shot her stepdad. Who could have done this? Her mind raced through possibilities. Maybe a burglar or some random attack. But just as she and her family were walking out of the house, her mom, Celeste, leaned in close and whispered something that made Christina's heart skip. Celeste told her not to mention Tracy's name if the police asked who might have done it. That single whisper opened up a flood of questions in Christina's mind.
So at that point, I'm shocked that first off, Steve had been shot, but I wouldn't have even thought who could have done it. I was wondering if it was burglar or random, but as soon as we walked out of the house, Celeste whispers to me, if the police ask you who might have done this, don't mention Tracy's name.
Why would Celeste say don't mention Tracy's name?
Why would her mom even say that? What did Tracy have to do with any of this? Tracy Tarlton wasn't a stranger to the family. 6 months before the shooting, Celeste met Tracy at St. David's Pavilion, a mental health facility. Celeste had been admitted there for depression, and that's where she crossed paths with Tracy. The two women formed a bond pretty quickly, and at first it seemed like a normal friendship. They started inviting each other to dinners and spending time together just to hang out, but it didn't stay just friendly for long.
They had this weird friendship.
I just remember thinking that this lady wants more from our mom than just a platonic relationship.
As the days turned into weeks, their connection deepened, and it became clear that what they had was more than just friendship. There was a growing intimacy between them that felt different. Christina and Jennifer, Celeste's daughters, sensed that something wasn't right. The way Tracy clung to their mom, how she always seemed to want more attention, made it obvious. This wasn't just a platonic relationship. The two women were drawn to each other in a way that hinted at something deeper, a type of closeness that went beyond just being friends. This relationship raised all sorts of questions for the twins, especially after Celeste's strange behavior following the shooting. Why had their mom told them not to mention Tracy's name? What role did this relationship play in what was happening now? As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that this bond between Celeste and Tracy was far more complicated and dangerous than anyone had realized.
I was thinking maybe she's protecting Tracy because she thought it was Tracy.
After getting to the hospital and talking to the detectives, they asked me, who do I believe shot my father? And I said, my mom doesn't want me to mention this, but I'm not supposed to say Tracy Tarlton.
As Christina and Jennifer made their way to the hospital to see Stephen, the words from their mother kept playing in their minds. The fact that Celeste specifically told Christina not to mention Tracy only made them more suspicious. Was Celeste trying to protect Tracy? And if so, why? The questions piled up as they tried to piece together what had happened. When they arrived at the hospital, detectives were already asking questions. Who could have shot Stephen? Christina hesitated, but finally told the detectives about the warning not to mention Tracy. And so the investigation turned its focus to Tracy Tarlton. The detectives dug into Tracy's life, her sudden closeness to the Beard family, and her odd relationship with Celeste. Tracy quickly became the prime suspect, but something didn't add up. There wasn't a clear motive for Tracy to shoot Stephen on her own. The police felt there had to be more to this story. The first thing the police did was obtain a search warrant for Tracy's house. There, they found a 20-gauge shotgun shell, the very type of bullet that had wounded Stephen Beard. It was a chilling find. The officers knocked on Tracy's door, and when they asked if she owned a shotgun, she didn't deny it. After some hesitation, she led them to the weapon, a Franchi 20-gauge shotgun with her name engraved on it. The police took possession of the gun and sent it in for analysis, and when the results came in, the shotgun was confirmed to be the one used in the attack on Stephen.
And that shotgun turns out to be the shotgun from which the bullet that injured Mr. Beard was fired from.
With this damning evidence in hand, the police arrested Tracy Tarlton on October 8, 1999, just 5 days after the shooting. She was charged with attempted murder. But even with Tracy behind bars, the detectives felt uneasy. Something wasn't right. Why had Tracy done this? She refused to talk, offering no explanation for her actions. The investigators were convinced that Tracy hadn't acted alone. Someone else had to be involved. Someone still walking free while Tracy remained silent. The detectives kept pressing, trying to uncover the full story, but Tracy held her tongue. Meanwhile, Stephen was still in the hospital, fighting for his life. His injuries were severe, and despite the efforts of the medical team, his condition remained critical. For months, his stepdaughters stayed by his side, hoping he would pull through. But after a long, painful battle, Stephen passed away from the injuries he had sustained in the shooting. The tragedy wasn't just in his death, but in the unanswered questions that still loomed. What really happened that night, and who was truly responsible? The twins, left devastated after their father's death, grappled with their grief and drowned in questions. Who could have done this to him? Why would anyone want to hurt him? They were trying to piece their lives back together, and their mother, Celeste, seemed to be doing her best to be there for them. She joined the girls in making funeral arrangements and helping pick out a casket for Stephen. But what happened next took them completely by surprise. In the middle of all the crying and sorrow, while they were at the funeral home, Celeste did something no one saw coming. She bought not just one casket for Stephen, but two more. Pink caskets for Jennifer and Christina. The girls were left in shock, wondering why their mother would do something like that. They were only 18. Why would she think they needed caskets? A chilling thought crossed Christina's mind. Was her mom planning for their deaths next?
A lot of crying's going on. We just lost a loved one.
And while we were there, she purchased 2 pink caskets for Jen and I. And she's like, I'm gonna get these for you guys.
The confusing part to me was Celeste suggesting that 18-year-olds needed to pick out a casket. And in the back of my mind, I thought, well, am I going in this casket soon?
As the days passed, the media caught wind of the story. Local papers and TV networks started running headlines about the mysterious shooting, with whispers that the real killer could still be walking free. But with no solid evidence, the police couldn't move forward. Meanwhile, Celeste's behavior became increasingly bizarre. She became erratic, and the twins noticed her acting completely out of character. While they were still crying over their father's death, Celeste would suddenly burst out laughing. Her eyes seemed wild, her emotions manic. It was unsettling, to say the least.
We're all crying, and Celeste is just laughing.
She kind of had like these crazy eyes.
Kind of manic, very loud and emotional, but didn't really seem real.
Then, things took an even darker turn on February 16, 2000. No one, least of all the twins, could have predicted what their mother would do next. That night, in a moment of sheer madness, Celeste suggested something horrifying. She told her daughters that they should all kill themselves. Before the twins could react, Celeste pulled out a knife, leaving them stunned and frozen in disbelief. In an instant, she lunged forward and stabbed herself in the leg. Blood started gushing from the wound, and Christina and Jennifer were left in a state of panic, unsure of what was happening.
She then said, hey, why don't we all kill ourselves?
And all of a sudden, she pulls out a knife.
She's holding it like this, and she goes to like kind of lunge.
She just stabs herself in the leg.
Blood starts gushing everywhere.
I was just like, what is happening?
They quickly called 911, begging for help as they watched their mother bleeding out. When the paramedics arrived, they rushed to Celeste's side, working to stop the bleeding. The girls stood there in shock as they watched their mother get loaded into the ambulance and taken to the hospital. Over the next few weeks, Celeste's behavior grew even more unhinged. She would call Christina and Jennifer from the hospital, her mood swinging wildly from calm to screaming fits in a matter of minutes. It was becoming impossible for the girls to understand what was happening to their mother. That's when Christina had an idea. In an effort to make sense of her mother's increasingly disturbing behavior, she decided to start recording their phone conversations. Maybe if Celeste could hear herself later, she would realize how erratic she had become. Christina hoped that playing back the conversations might help her mom snap out of it.
And screaming at me over the phone.
Would go from normal to screaming, back to normal.
That I thought, hey, you know what? I'm gonna start recording her conversations because I want to play them back to her, and she'll then hear, like, from my perspective what I'm hearing and think, oh, that's awful. I can't believe I'd do that.
But then something unexpected happened. During one of those phone calls, Christina's plan took a shocking turn. While she was recording, Celeste let slip a piece of information that changed everything. She admitted that she had hired someone to kill Tracy. The moment those words left her mother's mouth, Christina froze. It was like the final piece of a terrifying puzzle falling into place.
She says, "I hired somebody to kill Tracy." I froze. It made it all real, and it made it all unsafe.
In that instant, everything became real. The pink caskets, the manic behavior, and the strange events surrounding their father's death all pointed to one horrifying conclusion. Celeste had crossed a line, and now the twins feared they might be next on her list. And when after Celeste got out of the hospital, things only got worse for the twins. Christina and Jennifer knew they were in more danger than ever. They could feel it. This wasn't just about their mom's erratic behavior anymore. They realized that their only chance to survive was to disappear, to go into hiding where Celeste couldn't find them. Jennifer made the bold decision to empty her bank account, and the two sisters hit the road, running with no trace left behind. They moved from motel to motel, paying only in cash, making sure they stayed off the radar. Every day they lived in fear, knowing Celeste was trying to track them down. They could sense her getting closer, haunting them. That constant fear was overwhelming.
I cleared out my bank account for Christina and I to go on the run and not have any trace. We stayed in motels. Everything we did with cash. Celeste was trying to find us every day, trying to find us. All I kept replaying in my head was we are in danger. It was definitely terrifying. Like, we're not coming home from this.
Despite being on the run, they knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. Armed with the recorded phone conversations where Celeste had made threats, the twins went to the police. They were granted a family violence protective order, but that still wasn't enough to confirm their suspicions about who really killed their stepfather. They needed one more person to speak up, Tracy Tarlton, the woman who pulled the trigger. Tracy had kept her silence all this time, and even though she sat in prison awaiting trial for the shooting, she hadn't said a word about what really happened that night.
This whole entire time, Tracy was keeping her silence, that she acted in this alone.
But everything changed in March 2002 when she read in the newspaper that the twins had gotten a protective order against Celeste. It was like a switch flipped. Tracy couldn't stay quiet anymore. She decided to cooperate with the investigators, finally telling the truth they had been waiting to hear. It was her idea to kill Steve. It had been Celeste's plan from the start. Tracy revealed everything, from how Celeste manipulated her to the lies she told about Steve being abusive. It was all part of Celeste's scheme. With Tracy's confession about the twins' audio recordings, the police finally had enough evidence to arrest Celeste for capital murder on March 28, 2002. But even though Celeste was behind bars, Jennifer and Christina weren't ready to feel safe yet.
If she doesn't go to jail, I was going to be living underground forever. And I wasn't going to feel safe until she was in jail. With her on the street, nobody's safe.
Jennifer especially couldn't shake the feeling that if her mother didn't go to jail for good, she'd be living in fear forever. She wouldn't truly feel safe unless Celeste was locked away for life. The thought of Celeste still walking the streets made them realize that no one was safe until justice was served. On February 3, 2003, the trial began, and the twins knew they would have to do the hardest thing they had ever faced, testifying against their own mother in court. As they testified, they shared the dark reality of their childhood with the court. Growing up with Celeste had been a nightmare of violent outbursts, endless screaming, and constant emotional chaos. What they thought was normal had been anything but. And when Celeste married Steve Beard, it wasn't out of love. It was all about money.
Did the defendant ever talk to you about her feelings about Steve Beard?
Well, she said that she married Steve for his money.
Did she tell you about what would happen if Steve Beard died?
That she would get it on. She would say, why wouldn't he die already?
Did it appear that she was looking forward to that, or?
Yes.
The twins explained how their mom had openly admitted she married Steve for his wealth. She even talked about how everything would go to her once he was gone, making disturbing comments about how she couldn't wait for him to die. Investigators later uncovered just how much of Steve's money Celeste had been spending. Huge amounts on clothes, jewelry, and extravagant luxuries. The twins also revealed how Celeste had drugged Steve, slipping sleeping pills into his food, just so she could sneak out and be with Tracy. The truth behind Celeste's breakdowns and erratic behavior came to light, including the time she had pointed a gun at her own head and threatened Christina's life. It was during one of these breakdowns that Celeste ended up at a St. David's psychiatric hospital, where she met Tracy Tarlton. That's where the manipulation began. Celeste had played on Tracy's feelings, drawing her into a close and intimate relationship, all while weaving lies about Steve being abusive. Tracy believed she was helping Celeste escape an awful situation, but the reality was Steve wasn't abusive at all. Celeste had used her relationship with Tracy to set her plan in motion, manipulating her into pulling the trigger.
She expressed to me that she wanted the sexual relationship with me, which I also wanted.
Celeste had been setting up Tracy, saying, Steve is abusive to me. He's so horrible. And Tracy believed that Celeste was really in trouble.
Celeste Beard, I don't think ever loved, maybe didn't even like Tracy Tarlton, but she was willing to engage in a lesbian relationship in order to get what she wanted.
I just saw this woman that I loved in a desperate situation, trying to find a way to survive this man that was so awful.
Celeste said to Tracy, I cannot live any longer with this abusive husband, but Steve wasn't abusive.
And that was the dark truth. The truth that Christina and Jennifer had to face as they stood in court against their own mother, hoping to see justice done. Tracy finally took the stand in front of the twins, the jury, and everyone in the courtroom. What she said next laid out the dark and chilling details of Celeste's plan to kill Steve. Tracy spoke calmly, recounting how Celeste had coldly explained to her that Steve was old and would die soon, but not soon enough for her liking. Celeste didn't want to wait. She wanted him dead now. She had everything planned out and told Tracy exactly what to do.
You know, she says, oh man, he's gonna die soon, but not soon enough. She had a plan, and she wanted me to shoot him with my shotgun. Show me where to enter the grounds, where to park, and then we walked through how I would exit my car, where I would enter the house, how I would approach the bedroom. And I walked down to the end of the bed, and I saw him, and I pulled up, and I shot him. Shot him once? I shot him once.
Tracy described how Celeste had guided her through every step of the murder. She showed her where to park, how to enter the house, and the path to take once inside. Celeste had carefully mapped out how Tracy would approach the bedroom where Steve lay sleeping. Tracy admitted how she had followed Celeste's plan, walking into the house, heading straight to the bedroom, and finding Steve. With the shotgun in her hands, she lifted it and fired one shot. The courtroom stayed eerily quiet after Tracy's confession. The weight of her words hung in the air, leaving everyone stunned. Celeste, sitting there as Tracy revealed everything, didn't seem shaken. Instead, she sat coldly, shaking her head and even laughing at times. But that calm demeanor faded fast when her own daughters took the stand. It was their turn now, and they weren't there to hold anything back. Christina and Jennifer had one of the most damning pieces of evidence against their mother: the audio recordings of Celeste's murder plot against Tracy. As they played the tapes, the courtroom listened to their mother's voice, filled with rage and hysteria as she threatened them repeatedly. The recordings made it clear that Celeste's behavior toward her daughters was far from what any mother should be. The trial dragged on for weeks. Then, on March 19, 2003, after 3 long days of deliberation, the jury finally reached a verdict. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The twins, the prosecution, even Celeste herself.
Before we bring the jury out, if there is anyone in the courtroom who feels that they may have an emotional outburst, I would ask that you please leave the courtroom at this time. Ms. Johns, would you please stand?
Truly, we've been waiting for this for 3 years now. And so, yeah, it's very emotional, and you can't really know what 12 people that you've never met, what they're going to do.
Madam Foreperson, please read the entire thing.
The judge asked anyone who might have an emotional outburst to leave the room. Celeste was asked to stand as the jury prepared to read the verdict. Christina and Jennifer held their breath. This was it, the moment that would decide whether their nightmare would finally end or if Celeste would walk free to haunt them for the rest of their lives. The foreperson read the verdict, guilty of capital murder.
State versus Celeste Beard Johnson. Verdict of the jury. Verdict form 1, capital murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Celeste Beard Johnson, guilty of the offense of capital murder.
Celeste Beard was sentenced to 2 consecutive 40-year prison terms. She wouldn't even have the chance for parole until she was 79 years old. For the twins, it was a moment of immense relief. They could finally breathe again. After years of fear, running and hiding, they no longer had to look over their shoulders. Celeste wouldn't be able to hurt them or anyone else ever again. It had taken years of pain, fear, and loss to reach this moment, but finally, the twins could start to move on with their lives. This long, terrifying chapter of their lives that revolved around their mother's twisted schemes was over.